We're super excited to have Pete on here today. Pete, if you don't know, and I don't know how you would miss it if you're even remotely in tune with the NIL space, is one of the the primary writers at On3. Someone who I spend a ton of time reading the articles and the work that you put out into the industry, and we're super excited to have you here to talk just kind of broadly about the space, maybe dive into a couple of specific topics. But yeah, dude, really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to dive in and have this conversation.
Well, why don't we kind of start where we left off our last webinar, and just get some fresh perspective on it from your side. In our last conversation, we had Christy Dosh on here, and we were talking about kind of all things house settlements, from short form to long form, the different component pieces that I think folks are starting to dive a little bit deeper into. From your perspective, Pete, and you're obviously talking to a lot of different stakeholders across the industry. Where do you see people at kind of today as they're thinking about the future of college athletics, and specifically as it relates to the house settlement, how they're going to be kind of navigating these next months, if not years, as this thing continues to flesh itself out?
Yeah, I think earlier this summer there was a lot of questions and kind of just looking at each other and trying to figure out what to do. And now I think a lot of people are in the middle of planning mode and kind of rolling out what they're doing. And Clemson rolled out their Clemson Ventures program yesterday. I know quite a
Yeah.
few other schools are in the works of doing some similar things. So I think schools have kind of dealt with the okay, what's it going to look like, and okay, this is really happening, and now we're really starting to see them try to make these plans and try to attack it and try to get ready for what's to come.
That Clemson one is really interesting, and I'm curious your perspective on it. Like, did you see that as being more of a response to an NIL need, or was that hey, NIL layered into a broader MMR? We're kind of just taking that the larger commercialization in house.
Yeah. I think maybe a little bit is an NIL need, but I think at this point right now in college sports, whenever there's an NIL need, it's also kind of all wrapped up into the house settlement. So I think with the Clemson Ventures one specifically, it had a lot to do with just generating revenue and generating dollars, some for NIL and some for the house settlement. I mean, I had a conversation with someone today in the Big Ten. And they're already like looking at something like that in midway through the process, and it's all kind of layered in from my understanding, but it is interesting to see things reorganize for this new era of college sports.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting one to see whether or not folks are going to in-house it, whether they're going to try to find a third party to, serve as the operator for this. In terms of your perspective, and I think the risks have largely been kind of covered in a dozen different ways, but do you see certain ways for this being operationalized that take some of those risks, and Title IX, employment risk, like 501(c) risk, like is doing what Clemson just did, or what some of these others are thinking about in terms of kind of handing some of this off to another party to kind of serve as the operator? Do you de-risk, or is it truly just to bring in expertise and folks that are hyper focused on the commercialization side and the operational side?
Yeah, I don't know if a Clemson did necessarily address this Title IX. I think that's going to be a moving target for a lot of folks, and just even until the settlement really gets going and seeing right. I mean, I've written about this quite a bit. Like if the settlement states that college football players receive 75% of the TV revenue, does that set the precedent, for example, with revenue sharing, that because the judge said, okay, we'll give 75% of TV revenue and the back damages, does that set the framework for um handing out the revenue? So I don't. I think Title IX is going to be something that everybody has questions about, and no one really. I don't know if anyone truly has like the end all be all answer just
Yeah.
yet. In terms of employment, there's a lot of really smart lawyers out there who brought up some points too of, I mean, what's it mean for international athletes with the revenue sharing? We don't know the answer to
Yeah,
that. And then, I mean, employment wise, I know everyone has their eyes on the Johnson, yeah, the Johnson case, but I don't,
sure.
it's really a huge question mark still.
Have you looked into what's going on Dartmouth's campus? Obviously, that kind of came out, that they're continuing
Yeah.
to the union is continuing to kind of push the institution in that respect.
Yeah.
Like, how does that, and what are the implications of what's going on that campus across the broader industry?
You know, so small world, I actually covered Dartmouth athletics before I joined on three.
Oh, no way.
So Dartmouth athletics has actually had like a pretty tumultuous like 5 years. Like their athletic director had to step down in like 21, 22 because of some Title IX issues. And then they had an interim AD and now they have their new AD. And I didn't exactly think Dartmouth was going to become this mecca of the college
Yeah,
employment movement. But that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, I reported on it yesterday. I know Front Office Sports and Sportico did as well. Um, the athletes union, which is based in like the New Hampshire, New England area, filed a charge against Dartmouth to the National Labor Relations Board, saying that Dartmouth just won't have like they won't negotiate about pay yet, and this has kind of been a stance that Dartmouth's taken from the start.
sure.
I mean, I don't know if it's any major insight here, but I think trying to being a leader in this movement as a college athlete has been quite a lot for these players.
Yeah,
I know some players left the program this offseason. I know some coaches left the program this offseason. I think it's really added a lot of stress and change, and it's going to
sure.
be interesting too. I mean, no one else across the country has really picked up on it, right? There's the opportunity for other Ivy League schools to try to hitch on like other athletes, and they haven't. So, interested to see where it continues to play out and kind of how it goes.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Like, unless you're really, really passionate about that, it would be probably a decent damper on your college athletics experience to be kind of thrown into the furnace of, the nexus of employment law
Yeah,
at your, with your basketball team. Like, if you're just there to play the sport, that, yeah, would probably be a little bit tough.
totally.
Just kind of on that topic, I know that AO has kind of floated around there. Just, from your perspective, how settlements, collective bargaining, continues to
Mm,
kind of be thrown around as a way to, hey, bring the athletes to the table, make this a more kind of, you know, evergreen type of, outcome for folks involved. And, the Jim Cavals and some of the others that are out there have, more or less said, hey, if the athletes aren't at the table too, it's going to be a really difficult time to make
yeah.
this sustainable for the long term. Where have you seen any kind of movement within the industry, whether it's through an AO or someone else? I know there's a couple of other organizations out there that are doing similar types of things. Anything that's bringing the athletes more to the table at this point?
AO and Jim Cavell have done a nice job of trying to get in touch with athletes to explain what the hell a settlement is. He's come out with some like YouTube videos, I think, trying to explain
Yeah,
what it is. I have yet to see any movement though about like, hey, this is a move to like collectively bargain. I know Jason Saw with athletes.org has come out against I mean, he would prefer for collective bargaining as well. I'm not really sure how we make that jump. I think
yeah,
it's been really clear with the plaintiff lawyers that they have no interest in collectively bargaining. And obviously, it's something the NCAA and the power conferences don't want. Um, I think it could cause a lot of headaches though in the future. I think that you leave the athletes out of it, they're going to continue to want a piece of the pie moving forward. Um, I always tell collectives and administrators that I talk to, it's like collectives are already paying the quarterback $1 million right now. Okay. Well, if revenue sharing only pays for 200,000, there's still going to be a need to make up for the 800,000. People aren't going to just start taking less money because of the settlement. I think the same goes forward if the college football playoff television rate revenue is soaring and more schools are going to be making money. Well, do they deserve a direct cut from the college football playoff revenue monies? So things like that, which theoretically could be talked about in a collective bargaining, are not being talked about, and I think will just lead to more questions moving forward. And I mean, I know it's a ways away, but I already kind of have 2030 circled as a really interesting year in college sports. That's when all these TV contracts come up. That's when the
Yeah.
college football playoff could change again. So it seems like we're in the midst of change, but more change could still be coming.
Let's put a tentative webinar on the calendar for this
Hmm.
same time 2030, and I'll bet you
Yeah.
we're gonna blink and be there.
Yep.
Um, Probably have a little bit more white in the hair and beard, but
Yep.
fortunately we still have some hair. But yeah, I do think it's one of those things where it's becoming really interesting to see how the athletes come to the table to have some form of say, and whether or not that's going to equate to the sustainability of this settlement for the
Yeah.
long term, at least over the I think the 10-year or 15-year time horizon that it's supposed to be in effect for. So um collectives you brought up. I know you've done a lot of work. We
Yeah.
obviously work with a bunch of collectives. I know a lot of those collectives talk to you.
Yeah.
What are you seeing within the collective world and landscape as folks are preparing for kind of this, new world, new age? What are you seeing? What do you think, you're seeing that's really exciting and working well? What are some of the things that, folks need to watch out for? And I asked the question, through the lens of a lot of the folks that are going to be kind of watching and are
Yeah.
on this call work for collectives, just because they're kind of the folks that we talk to most often. So yeah,
Yeah.
anything that you're seeing in terms of where you see the ball going, who you think is doing it well, or you don't have to name names, but like if you're
Yeah.
seeing certain things that you think are best practices, would love to hear those.
Yeah, I guess the one disclaimer, obviously I'm not a collective operator, so this is just from my vantage
Sure.
point. But it's been interesting to watch this all play out. Tennessee right now as we speak, the Spire Sports Volunteer, they're rolling out their own brick and mortar outfitter store. So like people can go buy t-shirts to support NIL. So that's interesting. Um, it's been a really interesting landscape to cover and understand. And we've gone through so many phases. Right when I first started, it was okay, collectives are still like launching and people are trying to figure out how to do it. And you had these yoke NIL clubs, which everyone disliked. And then the next phase was everybody's really worked up about international athletes, but that has somehow now taken a back seat and doesn't seem to be in the spotlight as much. Then there's been other phases too, right, where every collective rolled out their beer or alcohol. How have those done? We don't hear much about that. Like,
Yeah.
so, I think there's a lot of
Everyone's
good,
got a shipping provider that is getting 50%,
yeah,
kickbacks that,
yeah.
you
So,
can count the tens of dollars that people are generating from that.
So for every collective on here, I mean, you do great work and it's really important. I mean, you guys are the reason why most of these athletes get paid. So kudos to you guys for doing what you do. But I think it is a really pivotal time. I think every collective is kind of on its own in the sense of they need to figure out how do they fit into their own school's ecosystem. Do they join the athletic department? Do they stick on their own because they're a third party and then they don't have to follow Title IX and can then still provide that competitive advantage for football and men's basketball that is so important? There's a lot of questions right now, and I mean, I was talking to Walker Jones last week, and he's in the middle of his huge collection day week at Ole Miss, and they're trying to raise dollars, and they probably have one of the biggest, if not the biggest, membership programs in the country for an NIL collective, and I mean, they're as close to the school as any collective we've seen right now. And um, Walker won't say it, but it's kind of evident to me. Like, I don't know if anyone has the exact question of like what it means to be really like close knit with your school other than having some sponsorship um, stuff cross paths. So
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think for a collective right now, there's a lot of questions you have to answer, and I wish I had the guiding light for everyone, but I think everyone kind of has to figure it out on their own and really try to figure out how much more money do your boosters or donors want to give, and what does your athletic director want, and how do you make all parties happy?
I don't know if you saw or reported on the LSU kind of like foundation model, but curious
Yep.
if you've kind of taken any, if you've taken a look at that and can maybe explain to folks how that's structured.
Nebraska did something really similar too. I mean, in the last
Hmm.
90 days, Nebraska has embraced their collective almost like no one else I've seen. LSU has done some similar stuff, but Nebraska and Troy Danton are all in right now. So
Yeah,
that's been interesting to watch. LSU, it's this idea of you create a foundation where you strike a deal with the I'll just call it the Tiger fundraising arm, right? Like your
sure,
general donor base. And they're going to come in and do all the fundraising for the collective, which is really smart because they know the donors, they know what they want, what they don't want.
sure.
It's a really creative way to make sure that um, uh, uh, donors are happy. And then there's also the opportunity for these boosters to get their priority points, which is really popular for season ticket holders and things like that. So I think something like that is going to become even more um, really common across this landscape.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that you're already starting to see folks are trying to find ways to get closer to their departments and vice versa. The departments are trying to get closer to the third parties. Yeah, generally, I think from an operational perspective, like if you're getting hit with a $22 million headwind to have to carve out of your budget to then have to staff up,
Yeah,
another half a dozen folks to manage this, when you've got someone, in most cases, if you have high trust with the collective or agency on your campus, it's probably a nice short term decision to at least stay
right.
agile enough. And I
Yeah,
was talking with a Power Four school just yesterday, and they said like, hey, you know, for us, if we go and do this ourselves, we're gonna have to hire probably 4 to 6 folks. If the world changes 12 months after that, or if we're wrong, like we're a public institution. It is not easy
right.
for us to go and just like, oh, hey, sorry guys, like you're fired, tomorrow. It's like, no, you are now a part of the system, and we either got to find different ways to leverage your talents or time, or you're going to be sitting in a dark corner doing
Yeah,
like spinning your thumbs.
yeah.
So
It's a
even
really pivotal
just
time.
even some of the operational risk is, I think, something that folks are trying to work their heads around.
Yeah.
Um, what are some of the cooler, you talked about Ole Miss's kind of like, big push this week, in Nebraska, kind of getting more involved. Like, are there certain things that you've seen that are, exciting within the space, like the brick and mortar stuff that,
Yeah.
in Tennessee, that's pretty cool. That's the first time I've heard of, collective going full brick and
Same.
mortar.
Same.
Um, and like anything else that you're hearing kind of out in the space that's, catching your ear or catching the eye of the industry?
You know, I know maybe it isn't the most exciting, but I spent so much time covering NIL and recruiting and the transfer portal. And these multi-year deals between collectives and athletes have become a lot more popular recently.
Interesting.
Athletes want it because it secures them more money. And I think collectives like it too, depending on how the contract is set up and just kind of providing some more comfortability that their athlete might not jump in the portal right away. So it really depends on how it's all structured. But I mean, that's one thing that I've spent a lot of time talking about and reporting on in the last, I guess, couple weeks.
With the roster sizes changing, how does
Hmm.
that affect NIL?
Hmm. Um, I think every program, like just talking to sources, I'm pretty confident that every program in the SEC is going to fund up to the 105. You talk
Yeah.
to some schools though in the Big Ten, and some might go 85, some might go 95, some might just like do 95 and then fund the rest partially as as a walk-on. So in terms of what it means for NIL, I think it means that maybe an NIL collective could be asked in certain circumstances to help cover a few scholarships.
Sure.
Um, and then, I mean, past that too, I think it's going to be really interesting. Like Texas Tech and SMU have taken these approaches where you pay each athlete something like 30 or 50,000. What's that look like now? They're making a shared revenue. Does not every player on the team then get some cash from the collective, or do they still expect to receive some cash?
In terms of kind of like the budgets that you're seeing out there, and again, not having to name
Yeah,
names, but like, what is the average football team going for these days? Like, if you want to be a top tier versus just like a kind of a more run of the
yeah.
mill power four, like where are you getting to that level of depth where you're getting a sense for kind of what the budgets are looking like with folks these days?
Yeah, I mean, like the very top spending programs are spending between 18 to 20 million a year. That's like your Ohio States and schools like that. Um, sorry. Beyond that, I mean, I'd say your average team is spending between 10 to 15 million for like mid-tier to top.
Sure.
And then beyond that too, I mean, it's you got to have at least 5 million a year.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that the article that you had yesterday with talking about the battle's end, kind of retention versus high school recruiting versus transfer portals. Like, are you seeing that trend too, where folks are really starting to kind of invest more inward,
Yeah.
at this stage versus I think within the first couple of transfer portals, it was just like it was Christmas for everyone, and like I just want to go and get this the shiny toy. um, but the trend of maybe looking more kind of at your own team and how you maintain your own team versus having to just kind of constantly replace 30% of your roster. Um, Obviously, in the article, which is a great one, and we'll link it as we send this stuff out. Like Florida State is already kind of getting there. Is that something you're seeing with others, or is that something that you think will become a larger trend?
I think that's something that a lot of these top schools are already doing, right? Like, I mentioned Ohio State. I know like a Tennessee, like it's all so much of these dollars are being spent on roster retention and then obviously trying to acquire talent. But I think most of the money in the acquired pool is being spent on getting top players in the transfer portal. And I think a lot of fans would be amazed to know how much their programs are spending on roster retention. Like
Yeah,
that is so much of what a collective does right now. And it's so much of like what they spend their like off season doing is just making sure that kids have their new contract, have things like that lined up. I mean, it's the reason why some of these programs will compete for a national championship this year is just because of what the
sure.
collective did this off season and keeping a player in Ann Arbor or Athens or Austin or wherever.
Yeah. On the transfer portal side, like, have you seen things, kind of level off? Are they still crazy? Or
Hmm.
is it just continue to be the Wild West? What's the transfer portal like these days?
Yeah, so the portal will like officially open back up again in December, but it really doesn't sleep. Like someone committed to
Yeah,
Texas last night from SMU. You know, the portal is college football's free agency. It's as simple as that. I think that with these roster limits, I think that the transfer portal could get even crazier now.
yeah,
Especially when you
sure,
factor in that some of these guys, depending on if players are grandfathered in or not with the house settlement, are they all going to
sure.
need new homes, things like that. And then, I mean, beyond that too, I think you could have programs say, okay, we're going to fund 105, but like we'll take, I don't know, 15 high school kids and 15 transfer kids a year, and that's going to make up like the final 30 spots on their roster. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think the transfer portal is going to be even bigger. And, you know, I know that everyone doesn't like the idea of like, oh my gosh, my starting quarterback for the last 3 years just went to some school on the West Coast or something like that. But at the same time, though, this idea that you can turn around a program more quickly than you ever could before, I think
Yeah.
only adds to the the attention on the sport and maybe some interest in certain regions of the country.
The fervor never ceases.
Yeah, that's
It
for sure.
only gets, yeah, it only rises and rises. Um, we got a question from the audience, and yeah, audience, feel free to toss in more. I probably got one or two more myself, but if there's anything you want to ask Pete, feel free to shoot it in. Just from the audience, how is the percentage of collective money spent on recruitment versus retention on average for the Power Five versus Group of Five, if you have a sense?
Yeah, I mean, my read and I guess my advice to an extent is if you're at a G5 school, I would think that it's more important than ever to spend dollars on retention so your starting quarterback doesn't try to move to the power four. I know I've had conversations though in the G5 though where some coaches believe they should embrace the minor league mentality where it's like, okay, we're gonna go recruit the best guys that we can, and if they leave, that just means it's a good thing, and maybe more guys will want to go here. So I think it has a lot to do with like what the approach is for the G5 football program and collective. I mean, at the same time, though, I think some. I mean, there's still the one thing though that I talked to when I talked to about football coaches is like Toledo still produced a first round pick in the NFL draft this year. So like the idea that you need to let your entire roster be rated, I don't think it's true. I think you can still find some players who want to play for your team for all 4 years, as long as they're paid. I don't know that maybe not even market value, but like a quarter or a half of their market value.
Yeah, we work with a bunch of G5 schools and even FCS and yeah, down to D2 and D3, and you'd be shocked at how many kids get really significant offers and decide that they want to stay, because they love their team, they love their coach, they love the community. Um, they do exist, and I think to your point, like you'll still have talent that lives within a lot of those programs,
Yeah,
that will find its way into the professional ranks.
definitely.
On the topic of collectives, I know the one I'm most excited about, and keep your eyes open for this, but we've got a big article coming out about collectives.
Yeah.
When can we expect it, and what's going to be in there?
Yeah, so we're rolling out our new top collective list next week. And I know that is something that everybody in the industry kind of
Oh
likes and
yeah.
looks forward to. So yeah, we're rolling that out next week. It should be fun. Just kind of coincides with week one of the college football season, kind of seemed fitting.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. Are there any any
No, no spoilers here. Not no spoilers. So
we tried, folks.
hmm,
On three
yeah,
is a little too big for us. Yeah, I mean, beyond that, Pete, like just generally curious where you see things going. Within, I would say, the next kind of 10 months between where we are today and when we would expect the House settlement to kind of go into effect. Are there, whether you're a collective, whether you're an athlete, whether you're an institution,
yeah.
where do you see, the pieces of the board kind of shifting?
Um, I don't think the like college football landscape is really going to shift, right? Like everyone's always asking me, like, is the transfer portal going to close down? Are NIL collectives going away? Like none of that changes until the House settlement is officially certified and approved, and we have yet to see that. I mean, September 5th is going to be a huge date. It's when we could get preliminary approval on the settlement. Still, though, that doesn't guarantee that Judge Claudia Wilkin is going to like certify the whole thing. The objectors are going to have their time in court too. So for me, the next 10 months, if we're going to go big picture, it's just like, just does the House settlement get pushed through? What does that look like? Is anything taken out? And then beyond that too, I mean, I know I could talk about this all day because I find it interesting how the NCAA keeps going back to Congress for help, but they're going to need some sort of congressional assistance to make their enforcement actually have some teeth. So,
Sure.
does that happen? And how does the November election kind of shape that? Those are going to be some really interesting things. that I watch. And then obviously, I mean, college football's back, and next thing I know, we'll be knee deep in the transfer portal and roster retention and things like that. But those are just, I guess, some big picture things I have my mind on as we move forward.
Do collectives go away?
No, they don't. They're way too important, and
Do they turn into agencies, or does it not even matter?
um, I don't think it matters. I don't see the difference between agency and or not. So
Yeah.
it's
I
the
think
same
there's
thing.
at least the outward facing
Yeah.
commercialization kind of like
And
components.
trust me, I'm sure there's some collectives on here who laugh, but the top collectives will still find a way to, if they need to turn into a marketing agency, there'll still be some sort of a LLC or a nonprofit in the background,
Yeah,
making sure that dollars go in and out.
yeah, I agree. Pete, can't thank you enough for the time, man. Really appreciate all the insights. We're gonna share this video. We'll share Pete's Twitter handle where you can follow him, where you can see his articles. Again, On3 and your work for that group are, you know, premier, dude. It's one of the few places I go to every day just to learn more about what's going on within the industry. So yeah, can't thank you enough for sharing your time and giving us a chance to learn a little bit more about the space.
You bet. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.